Mike Johnson just suffered one of the most embarrassing defeats of his leadership. In a vote that should have been routine, 3 Republicans rebelled against the leadership and voted with Democrats, blocking Johnson's attempt to shield Trump's tariffs from congressional challenges. This defeat exposes the fragility of Republican leadership and paves the way for direct confrontations over the administration's tariff policy. If you want to understand what's really happening behind the scenes of power in Washington, don't leave this video and subscribe to the channel and leave your like. On Tuesday night, we witnessed a spectacular collapse of Mike Johnson's leadership in the House of Representatives. The procedural vote, known as a rule vote, which is normally just a formality to establish the parameters of legislative debate, was rejected by 214 votes in favor versus 217 against. To put the magnitude of this defeat in context, rule votes almost never fail because they are basic party line votes that test the strength of the majority. This was the 3rd rule rejected under Johnson's leadership in this Congress, an absolutely extraordinary record that demonstrates the fragmentation of the Republican Party. What made this defeat particularly humiliating was the fact that Johnson delayed the vote for 7 hours, from 1:30 in the afternoon until 8:30 at night, desperately trying to convince the dissidents. During that period, the majority leader and other members of Republican leadership circulated on the floor, applying maximum pressure on those who were undecided. Even so, 3 Republicans held their ground: Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Kevin Kiley of California, and Don Bacon of Nebraska. With the current margin of only 1 vote that Republicans can lose on party line issues, these 3 votes were enough to bring down the entire leadership strategy. The substance of this vote is what really matters here. Within the procedural rule, Republican leadership had inserted specific language that would block any floor vote in the House on resolutions challenging tariffs imposed by Donald Trump until the end of July. This was not a minor technical detail. It was a calculated maneuver to protect Republican members from having to publicly take a position on tariffs, especially in an election year. Kevin Kiley was straight to the point when he explained his opposition. The rule exists to bring bills to the floor and set the parameters of debate. It's not to smuggle in unrelated provisions that expand leadership power at the expense of our members. Don Bacon was equally clear in his post-vote statement, saying that Congress needs to be able to debate tariffs and that Article 1 of the Constitution places authority over taxes and tariffs with Congress for a reason. Bacon argued that for too long the legislature has handed over that authority to the executive and that the time has come for Congress to reclaim that responsibility. This vote didn't happen in a vacuum. It occurs in the context of a much larger controversy involving Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnik and his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, revealed by files recently released by the Department of Justice. Thomas Massie, one of the 3 Republicans who voted against Johnson's rule, is also on the front lines calling for Lutnik's resignation. Massie co-authored the law that forced the release of Epstein's files, and the revelations about Lutnik have been explosive. Lutnik had publicly stated on a podcast last year that he cut off all social, business, and philanthropic contact with Epstein after a 2005 meeting at Epstein's home in New York, where Lutnik was his neighbor. He described that encounter as disturbing and swore he would never again be in the same room as that repugnant person. But Epstein's files tell a completely different story. The documents show that Lutnik continued having contact with Epstein for more than a decade after 2005, including meetings in 2011 and a visit to Epstein's private island in the Caribbean in 2012, this time accompanied by his wife and 4 children. The situation became even more serious when Lutnik testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee. Under questioning from Democrats, he admitted to the meetings he had previously denied, trying to minimize them by saying he had only 10 emails with Epstein over 14 years and that he had no relationship with him. The problem is that the files contradict this version. The documents show that Lutnik and Epstein invested together in a private company called Adfin Solutions after the island visit in 2012. They also show that Lutnik invited Epstein to a fundraising event for Hillary Clinton in 2015, and that the 2 maintained correspondence about construction projects that were blocking their views in New York until 2018. Massey has been relentless on this point, saying that Lutnik should simply resign. He noted that in the United Kingdom, 3 people have already resigned from political positions for connections to Epstein that were less extensive than Lutnik's. Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, joined Massey in calling for Lutnik's resignation or dismissal. The pressure is bipartisan, but the White House responded by expressing full confidence in Lutnik, calling Trump's cabinet the best and most transformative in modern history. Massey and Khanna also revealed that when they reviewed the complete and uncensored files at the Capitol, they discovered that at least 6 powerful men had their names redacted in the public versions of the documents, raising serious questions about transparency and accountability. These issues of fragile leadership and scandals don't exist separately from the broader economic context affecting ordinary Americans. This is where Bernie Sanders' critique of the Trump administration's economic narrative becomes relevant. Sanders has consistently pointed out the disconnect between the official discourse about the economy and the reality experienced by most Americans. When Trump declared that the economy is better than ever in history, Sanders responded by questioning whether the president is completely disconnected from reality or simply pathologically lying. Sanders points out that 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay for basic necessities. Healthcare costs continue to rise. Housing is inaccessible to millions. People can't afford their basic groceries. The child care system is dysfunctional, and higher education is beyond the financial reach of many families. This is the economic reality that provides the context for the vote on tariffs. Tariffs effectively function as indirect taxes that are passed on to American companies and consumers. When Trump imposes tariffs based on personal conversations with foreign leaders, as he reported doing with the Prime Minister of Switzerland, he is making decisions that directly affect the pockets of working Americans without proper congressional oversight. This is why the position of Republicans like Don Bacon, Thomas Massey, and Kevin Kiley in this vote is constitutionally significant. They are arguing that Congress should reclaim its constitutional authority over trade and tariffs. Under national emergency procedures, members of Congress can introduce privilege resolutions that force votes on tariffs. With the defeat of Johnson's rule, the House will now have the ability to vote to block Trump's tariffs. Democrats have already begun preparing resolutions to challenge tariffs on Canada and other countries. Republican members representing districts where tariffs are causing economic harm will be under growing pressure from their constituents to vote against these tariffs. This is exactly why Republican leadership tried to block these votes, to protect their members from having to choose between supporting Trump and supporting the economic interests of their voters. What we are witnessing is not just a procedural defeat for Mike Johnson. It's a symptom of deeper tensions within the Republican Party over constitutional authority, executive oversight, and the growing disconnect between political rhetoric and the economic reality faced by ordinary Americans. The question is not whether there will be more confrontations of this kind, but when and on what issues they will occur. Mike Johnson's defeat and the controversy surrounding Howard Lutnik revealed deep fractures in the current political landscape. While leadership tries to control the narrative, individual members are increasingly willing to defend constitutional principles and transparency. If you found this analysis useful, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next analyses. Most importantly, leave your comment. Do you think Congress should reclaim its constitutional authority over tariffs? Your opinion matters in this fundamental debate about the separation of powers.